Hey, hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady, and today I'm reviewing the brand new Mercedes Benz EQS580 SUV, the latest all-electric car from Mercedes Benz. So in this review of the EQS SUV, I'll be covering the interior, exterior, all of the battery-related, EV-related items, and of course, take it for a quick drive. So with that, let's get started with this review of the Mercedes Benz EQS580 SUV. Alright, so let's start the review off by giving a big thank you to Keys Mercedes for giving me access to this EQS 580 SUV today. If you happen to be interested in an EQS SUV, give them a call. They've got several of them in stock. But if you're also interested in any other new or pre-owned Mercedes product, I've left all of their information in the description below. Now, let's get started with pricing and the trim levels within this new EQS SUV lineup. So there's eventually going to be 3 trim levels to choose from. The base EQS 450 Plus starting at $104,400. The 450 4MATIC, which is basically the base plus all-wheel drive, for a premium of $3,000, $107,400. And the top of the line like this one, the 580 4MATIC, starting at $125,950. After you've decided which trim level you're going with, then come the initial packages. Here's a glimpse of each for the EQS SUV, and Mercedes has started doing this recently where they bundle several high-interest items into a larger package prior to you even picking any of the a la carte options. So you've got the Premium, Exclusive, and Pinnacle. All right, now let's talk about the exterior, starting off with the size. Now, the EQS SUV is actually smaller than its gas-powered equivalent, GLS, from Mercedes. And you can certainly tell when you see it in person. But as far as the looks go, there's definitely resemblances of the GLS in this EQS. What Mercedes have done is basically rounded everything off a little bit, much like they did for the S-Class and the EQS sedan. Now, this is obviously for better aerodynamics, but it doesn't look that bad either. The signature connecting light bar for the headlights, the single frame black grille up front, and in the rear you see the same light bar style taillight and rounded off rear end. It's a rather classic and understated looking SUV from Mercedes, but one thing about it is that because of that rounded off shape, I almost feel like it looks like a van versus a traditional SUV. I don't know, maybe it's just my eyes playing a trick on me, but I'll leave that up to you to decide. Alright, so now let's get into the nitty-gritty details about the EV aspect of this car, starting off with a battery. So according to Mercedes' website, this car is equipped with a 108.4 kilowatt-hour battery. But when I looked at the window sticker, it says 107.8. So I'm not sure what the discrepancy is or what the official number is, but also know that there are multiple motor configurations for the EQS. And your first option is with the base 450 Plus that's got a single motor and it's rear-wheel drive. That's good for 355 horsepower and 419 pounds-feet of torque. If you upgrade to the 450 4MATIC, the all-wheel drive version, you get a little bit more torque, but the same horsepower, 355 and 590. And in the top-of-the-line 580, 2 motors, one in the front, one in the rear, combined output of 536 horsepower and 663 pounds-feet of torque. Performance figures in the base rear-wheel drive, 6.5 seconds to 60, in the all-wheel drive 450, 5.8, and in the all-wheel drive 580, 4.5. Now, as far as its weight goes, it's surprisingly heavy. This is probably the heaviest car I have ever reviewed, coming in at 6,228 pounds, so a significantly heavy car in the EQS 580 configuration. Now, as far as the range goes, there's an actual range that Mercedes publishes. It's 285 miles up to 305 miles. Now, range, of course, has a lot of variables, how heavy your foot is, what type of configuration, what type of wheels. All of these things factor into the range you'll be able to get in your EV car. All right, so you've used up your battery, now you need to charge it. So the compartment is over here on the rear end of the car on the passenger side. So you have the ability to AC and DC fast charge. Now if you AC fast charge at 9.6 kilowatts, it'll take roughly 12 hours to charge this thing to full bake. Now if you use DC fast charging at the 200 kilowatt juiced pace, it'll take 31 minutes to go from 10% to 80%. Now Mercedes is also throwing in a little bit of a bonus for anybody who decides to buy an EQS SUV, and that is you'll be receiving 2 years of complimentary 30-minute charging sessions at any Electrify America DC fast charging stations. Now if you ask me, that's a pretty sweet deal, and you basically won't have to pay much to charge your EQS, at least for the first 2 years of ownership. All right, so before moving on to the cargo space and the interior, let's cover the last mechanical component, the suspension, the wheels, and the tires, because it has a direct translation into how the car feels. So this thing is equipped with an adaptive air ride suspension. It's called Airmatic, and it's basically an air suspension that has the ability to raise and lower itself based off of certain driving conditions and of course the driving mode. And you also have the ability to raise and lower it yourself at the touch of a button. Well, it's not a button, it's inside of the screen of the infotainment system, and you also have adaptive shocks. So this also gives you the ability to make the ride a little firmer or softer based off of the road conditions and essentially how you feel while you're driving. Now it also has rear wheel steering, and this is a key item because it comes as standard, and not only because it comes as standard, is because it has a lot of function for day-to-day usage. When you've got rear wheel steering, and the rear wheels have the ability to adjust or turn up to 10 degrees, and this essentially shrinks the car. So the direct translation into real life driving is less three-point turns, so you have a wider turning radius. Now in addition to that, let's switch over to the wheels. So you have an option of 20-inch wheels or 21-inch wheels. This car is equipped with these beautiful 21-inch wheels. There are several options that are available through Mercedes, and the tires that wrap them are 275s on all four corners. So with that out of the way, now let's move to the rear end, where I'll talk about some of the cargo space, and then we'll move to the interior. All right, so now we made it to the rear end, and let's talk about the cargo space in this EQS SUV. So opening the trunk, there are multiple ways of doing it. There's a button on the interior, there's a button on the key. You've got this big Mercedes logo, and so long as you've got the key with you, you're able to push on this and that'll open the trunk. And there's also the kicking motion underneath the license plate. So let's go ahead and open this thing up. I'll show you how much space you've got in here, pushing the big Mercedes logo. And once this thing opens, you'll be greeted with a substantial amount of room. So if you have the second row up, you have 31 cubic feet of space, and I can easily see somebody fitting multiple large pieces of traveling equipment with you, so no issues with the second row up. Now if you had the second row down, that increases your cargo space up to 74.2 cubic feet. Now this is substantial, and there is a lot of room in the back of the EQS. Now speaking of folding down those rear seats, Mercedes has put in one of my favorite convenience features in the EQS, and I also saw this in the GLS SUV, and that is you have the ability to electronically lower the second row seats from the back of the car. So there are two switches, one for the left portion of the back seat and one for the right, and these buttons fold and raise the seats. Now this is super convenient, and I tip my cap to Mercedes for putting this feature in this car because it's missing in a lot of other large SUVs, and it's a huge head scratcher for me on why every manufacturer doesn't put this in larger SUVs. So that's pretty much it for cargo space. Now let's jump onto the interior, and I'll give you my impressions of what's going on in there. All right, so now the interior of the EQS, and first thing I want to address is that the EQS is standard with a 5-person seating configuration. In case you wanted the 7-seater, that's optional. You got to pay a little bit extra for it, but it's nice that it's available. Interestingly, the GLS, the gas-powered version of this, is standard with 7 seats. So I'm really interested to see or understand why Mercedes decided to go with 5-seater as standard in this, considering it's the electric equivalent to the GLS. Now let's talk about the rest of this. Let's jump into it with quality and with design. So starting off with the design, this has a very nice balance as far as its design goes, and by balance I mean there are some classical Mercedes touches touches in here with the wood and the leather. And the wood in here is actually really interesting. I didn't see this in the EQS SUV. It's got like these Mercedes star logos right here in the center portion and also on the door panels. Really cool looking and almost futuristic, and that ties in to the second half of the design, and that's that futuristic EV related modern interiors, of course, with the hyper screen, which comes standard in this car, and I'll talk about that here in detail in just a second. But the overall layout and the screens, and this car also has a heads-up display, which is optional. So it's a very wow type of interior. When you get into it, you're kind of like, oh geez, this is really cool looking, and the design is very forward thinking compared to a traditional SUV. Like for example, in the GLS, it looks completely different than this EQS. Now, the quality is also top-notch. The leather in here is fantastic. Speaking of the leather, this is an optional beige, almost white cross-stitch leather on the seats, and it looks really, really nice. Now, the one thing that I would change is this gray balancing leather on the dash and over here in the center armrest. The leather material itself looks a little different. I wish it was the same as the rest of the car. And then this gray kind of, I don't know, strikes or doesn't balance in with the rest of this interior color. So that's one thing I would change. Now, as far as the size and the comfort, size, I'm 5'11". I fit in here just fine. You can see I have several inches of headroom on top of me. The passenger next to me, I've got plenty of room in the front compartment area here. I'll talk about the rear here in just a second. But overall size is great. The seat is immensely comfortable. The leather is soft. The cushion is soft. You're going to come and sit in here, you're going to think, this is a really comfortable seat. Now, the seat comes standard with heated and cooled configurations. You also have the ability to get massaging. That's optional. This example I have today is equipped with massaging seats. So overall, a very, very comfortable seat to sit in. Now let's switch over into the technology, and because this is an S or an EQS 580, it comes standard with the hyper screens. And if you're not familiar with the hyper screens, there are 3 screens in this car, and it's covered with 56 inches of glass, and it's a single piece of glass. Mercedes gets very technical about how they mold this glass to cover basically your entire dash, and it's very, very cool. This is definitely the wow factor of any EQ related car that has the hyper screen. So those 3 screens, the first one is right in front of you as a gauge cluster. That's 12.3 inches. The center screen is 17.3, and that doubles as your infotainment system. And even the passenger has a 12.3 inch screen in front of them. So the center screen and that passenger screen are OLED technology. They're super bright, they're super crisp and easy to read. And as far as the infotainment system, this is the latest version of MBUX, and if you've watched any of my other reviews, I really like MBUX for its simplicity, for the overall software design, the way it looks, the interface, the overall interaction with it, the touch screen, the Hey Mercedes feedback or interaction method with it. It's just a fantastic system. It's easy to get used to, and I really like it a lot. Now, the additional layer, this is really cool, and I was kind of baffled when I heard it, is this infotainment system has augmented reality learning, or artificial intelligence, not augmented reality, artificial intelligence learning. And as an example, what it can do. So for example, if you always dial your sister on Friday at 6:15 when you're driving home, and you constantly do that, the infotainment system will learn that, and on Fridays at 6:15 when you're driving home, it'll say, "Hey Andy, do you want to call your sister?" And when I heard that, I was like, wow, this is really, really insane, and so interesting how technology is basically taking over cars as well. So that's really, really cool and interesting, and that's tied to your driver profile. So don't worry if your a friend or your child or your significant other, somebody jumps into this car, it's not going to dial Andy's sister at 6:15 on a Friday. So it's tied to your profile, that whole learning artificial intelligence aspect of it. Now, some of the other amenities, there is a standard panoramic roof in the EQS SUV, and I always like to cover charging in any car. So you've got 4 USB Type-C outlets in the front and 1 wireless charging pad to charge your wireless charged enabled device. So now that's basically the front. Let's jump into the rear and I'll tell you what's going on back there. All right, so now the back seats of the EQS, and let's talk about the overall size first, and then I'll talk about some of these screens and some of the cool stuff going on back here. So as far as size goes, I sit back here just fine. Plenty of headroom on top of me. Somebody 6'1", 6'2" would probably fit in here just fine. You do have the ability to adjust your seat, the forwards, backwards motion. You can move your seat forward, backward, all of these wonderful adjustments, even in the back seat. So no issues with getting comfortable or sizing in the back seat. The leather is very soft. You continue the leather from the back, from the front area with the cross stitching. So it's a really nice looking back seat as well. You also have heated seats in the back, so additional bonus and additional comfort for your backseat passengers. As far as some of the other stuff, some of the cool stuff going on in here. So you can see I've got 2 screens in here, and I believe these are both 11-inch or 12-inch screens. And it's actually really interesting to see screens in the back of an SUV. I haven't reviewed one with screens, but this one nonetheless does have it. It's a $3,000 option. And you also get a little Mercedes Benz tablet that's inserted right here in the center compartment or in the center armrest. It's actually not in this car. I'm not sure where it is. Maybe the dealer has it somewhere. But you have the ability to control several items from the tablet and also from the screen in front of you. So you have all of the items related to the car. You can enter in a navigation location, radio. You can turn on certain air conditioning features. Because this is a 4 climate control zone area, not only can you do it from the screen, there's also a little screen here that allows you to control the fan speed, the temperature the air is blowing at, the direction, and all those wonderful things. And in addition to that, charging. Now, there are 2 USB Type-C outlets down here in this lower portion. There are also 2 HDMI outputs. So these are the HDMI mini connectors, so you'll have to use an adapter if you have the full-size HDMI. And in addition to that, you have a wireless charging port here in the center compartment. So there are a lot of amenities back here. Oh, and I forgot the panoramic roof. There's the additional glass back here, which is always cool to look out of. So that's pretty much it for the interior. Now let's go to the driving portion of the review and see what this thing feels like behind the wheel. All right, so now the driving portion of the EQS review. And as always, this is what the key looks like. It's a regular Mercedes key. I actually like it a lot because it doesn't have plastic on it. It's quite heavy for a key, a lot of metal on there. Good high quality key. Now, as far as the price goes, I've got the window sticker here. As I said, expensive car, $124,000 base price before the destination and handling. And this example I'm driving today, $142,800. So roughly $20,000 in options, $17,000 and change in options. So this is a rather expensive car. Now, as far as visibility goes, it does have a great seating position, great visibility from all angles out the back. It has a fantastic security camera, not security camera, but 360-degree camera, and it's got all these sensors and all this wonderful stuff to prevent you from curbing your wheels or hitting something, or just making sure you have all the angles covered. So great camera system in this car. So let's go ahead and turn it on and go for a ride. Now it's on. You could barely tell. Seatbelt, and let's go for a quick spin. The camera turns on. Very, very nice camera, as I mentioned. And let's see what this EQS SUV is all about. So as you're setting off here, and I'm in comfort mode, everything's in comfort, you have a really nice high command driving position. It feels like you're sitting up very, very high and you're kind of looking on top of everyone. I know this is one of the selling points for SUVs, and it's definitely alive in here. It's obviously doesn't feel exactly the same as the GLS, but you definitely get that high driving experience. Now let's put this in sport mode because I'm going to get a straight stretch of road, and let's see what this thing feels like. Oh wow, yeah, very, very powerful. Moves really, really well. Very surprising actually on how nice this thing moves. The acceleration down low is immense because the torque is just available from 0. But the surprising thing about it is, considering how big this car is, how quick it moves. Very, very quick, very, very quick accelerating car. I would not imagine having any issues driving this, passing on the freeway, getting onto the freeway, so no issues whatsoever as far as the speed goes. And that 4.5 second speed acceleration time is very respectable for a big car like this. Now let's go ahead and put it back in comfort mode. And speaking of modes, I'm going to use those and talk about the steering and the suspension. So I'm in comfort mode, and the first thing you'll notice when you're driving this car is how comfortable it is and how quiet it is. It's a very serene and quiet, isolated experience. I think Mercedes has done a fantastic job really quieting down the drivetrain noise. You get very, very little noise in this car. And the overall comfort, the way it soaks up the bumps, is very nicely tuned as well. But I will admit this, that it's not the most comfortable riding car Mercedes makes. That belongs to the S-Class. I saw that in the EQS sedan as well. It's not as comfortable as the S-Class. There's just something magical about the way that car rides. And it's not to say that this car rides bad. It's actually very comfortable, but not as good as the S-Class. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is the brake and the brake recuperation. Now, the brake pedal, I feel like, needs a little bit of improvement. And the reason why I say that is I found myself really having to push deep down into the pedal to get this big, heavy car to stop. I wish I had a little bit more braking power right at the top of the pedal. Now, as far as the brake recuperation, there are 4 different modes in this car. One is auto, and I'm not sure exactly how the car determines whether to do it strong recuperation, normal recuperation, or no recuperation, but essentially it has an auto mode. And then you've got no recuperation, which basically feels like you're driving a gas-powered car. You take your foot off the pedal and it slowly starts slowing down and coming to a stop. Then you've got normal recuperation, which is what I'm in now. And this isn't the strongest level of recuperation, and I would say those who are one-pedal driving may find it inadequate because you really have to time it way in advance in order for it to come to a stop without you using the brake pedal. Now, completely different story in the strongest recuperation mode, which is D-, and I'm not sure why you would use the minus instead of the plus. You would think the strongest would be the plus mode. But anyway, D- is the strongest mode, and this is a very aggressive brake recuperation. So for example, I'm going to demonstrate here, taking my foot off the gas pedal now, and it moves forward and it starts to decelerate at a very fast pace. Another example, and it moves me forward. Those are the brake recuperation modes. Now, as far as overall, what is this thing? Do I like it? I think on its own, this is a fantastic SUV. It's super cool. From the outside, it looks cool. The inside, the interior is cool, very modern, forward thinking, with the big hyper screen, which I know is optional, and the screens in the back are also optional. But the overall design and the layout and the ambient lighting and the leather and just the way everything looks makes the interior feel and look very, very cool. And it's also pretty fast, consider, of course, this 580 trim level, considering its size. Now, that's when you look at it on its own. But how about comparing it to its gas-powered big brother or sister, whatever you want to call it, the GLS? And I think it's at an immediate disadvantage when you compare it to the GLS. And that's because when you compare base to base, this car comes with 5 seats, the GLS comes with 7 seats. And immediately that puts this at a disadvantage, especially considering that base for base, this car is roughly $25,000 more expensive than the GLS. And one of the reasons why I think this is a big disadvantage is because why do people buy big cars like this? Because they want more space and they want to carry around more people. And when you factor in that negative about only 5-person seating as standard, plus you got to pay more, and the car itself is $25,000 more expensive, I don't know, it becomes a different proposition. But I will tell you this car looks cooler, rides more comfortably, has a cooler interior, more technology, and just overall has a cooler vibe, and obviously the latest and greatest experience. So if you're somebody who wants all of those things and is willing to pay the extra money for that experience, I think this is a great car. If you're somebody who's looking for that extra space and wants the 7-occupant seating, then, and save some money, obviously, then the GLS is probably going to be better for you. I highly recommend that you drive both and experience both before you make a decision. And if you're interested in watching a GLS review, I've done a full one, so there's a link coming up here in the right-hand corner of your screen. You can click that and watch that. But if you've got any other questions about this car or comparing it to the GLS or whatever the case may be, please send me a comment down below of this video or send me a message on Instagram at DriveSteady. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.